When it comes to building wealth, everybody is always going to the Roth IRA or the 401k or technical jargon of building wealth. But what nobody talks about in the financial space is the emotions that someone goes through to become wealthy. And I'm gonna break that down exactly today of my personal experience from going from negative $8,000 net worth to $1 million plus in just a decade. There were a lot of things that we had to do or sacrifice in order to get here. And this video is not about cutting my coffee out or eating beans and rice. That's not the point here. These are the tough decisions you have to make that are very hard to make in real life. So today I'm gonna break down 10 specific things my wife and I had to do in order to become wealthy that aren't typically the things we talk about. So we're not gonna talk about investing a certain percentage or which Roth IRA to pick. We're gonna specifically talk about real life today. So to put it in perspective, I was fresh out of college with my wife and we were about to get married when we started looking into our wealth building journey. So we were around 22, 23 years old. The very first thing that came up was losing friends and family. And that's a tough thing to do. To truly go against your friends and family, they know you as the old you. And they know you as the person they grew up with and the person they built a relationship with. But if you want to get to the point where you're going to change your future and you're going to stop doing what you've always done, it's going to be very weird when you're in that circle. And naturally, you're going to drive apart. But you have to be prepared for that when you're building wealth, because most of your friends and family aren't going to do the wealth building strategies that you're doing. And if you're fully focused on those things, that's what you're going to think about. That's what you're going to talk about. And when you bring those things up in circles, it's going to get awkward. And you have to prepare that those friends and those family, a lot of those people are going to move on from you if you don't do so yourself. Being able to lose friends and family is not a comfortable thing. It's not something any of us are typically used to or accustomed to or want to happen, but it's going to naturally happen when you change in any capacity, especially with your personal finances. And so the second thing is when you're building wealth, you're not always going to know what to do, how to do it, or when to do it. And that's a very challenging thing, is not only your friends and family and everyone else is telling you it's the wrong thing to do, or don't focus on that, take your time, but you also are struggling to figure out the actual pathway. And you're creating a lot of resistance in your life. And one thing I've learned about resistance is that successful people can handle a ton of it. And people that are not successful can't handle much of it. So the more resistance that you can take on as a person, the more successful you be. Think about time under tension, time under the bar. The more time, the more tension, the more resistance you're creating, the stronger you're gonna get. No different in personal finance. Number 3 is the eye-opening experience you're gonna have when you first dive into your finances. The first thing we did as a couple, we looked back at our 3 months of spend. So the last 3 months we looked at spend, investments, everything from head to toe, and we realized we weren't doing well. We had over $1,000 that was totally wasted on a given month. That's $12,000 per year that was going to waste. It's good, it's bad, it feels weird. It's gonna be one of those things that you deal with differently than the next person. We were a little down at first, but then we realized there's only potential from here. So once we figure out the issue, awareness, now we can fix that problem. We can fix that issue and we can adjust going forward. So it was actually a positive, but at first it feels very weird. And this often is because the emotional cycle of change. When we start something, we have uninformed optimism, but that quickly slides to informed pessimism, which eventually goes to the valley of despair. And then once we hit the valley of despair, which is our low point, we go right back up to informed optimism and ultimately success and satisfaction. So you will experience a wide range of emotions with anything that you're changing. So the emotional cycle of change doesn't only apply to personal finance, but really anything that you do that you change. Number 4 were the mentors that came into my life. One thing I wasn't really anticipating is that other people coming into my situation and helping me. But once I opened up my mind to take in that information, it helped me more than I know. Now, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was at Deloitte, when I was 23 years old, my main mentor there, Troy Kavanaugh, told me to invest in my 401k. And I felt as if it was leaving my bank to a foreign location. And what I didn't realize was I was still keeping it in my ecosystem or my world of investments. But instead of putting it in my bank, which I was accustomed to, I actually was able to put this in an investment to actually grow at a faster rate. But what I didn't realize when I was 23 was it didn't feel like it. I felt like I was losing that money. And that was a hard mental battle to get over. But having a mentor like Toy, who's already been there and done that, and had success with the 401k, told me to do it. And she basically made me do it. It was just 6% of a $50,000 salary at the time. However, it changed my life entirely because it was taking the muscle memory and repeating that process over and over and over until it got used to it. Then I started increasing my salary, then therefore increasing my contribution. But it became more normalized the higher my salary went. So that extra contribution just became second nature. And then secondly, Bob Bitter there taught me all about investing. One thing I didn't grow up with was investing knowledge. No one taught me. Schools didn't teach me, my parents didn't didn't teach me, my friends didn't teach me, and I'm not blaming anybody. It just is what it is, and that's okay. But one person that really changed the trajectory of my wealth building was Bob Bitter, who was a partner at Deloitte when I was there in 2016. And he walked me through on a whiteboard one night exactly how he had his assets distributed. And the word asset was kind of foreign to me at the time. I was a CPA, obviously, but from a personal finance perspective, we didn't talk about assets a lot, right? We didn't talk about wealth building a lot. And having him break down his assets and his balance sheet for me and understanding where things were going and why changed my life forever. And it made me change the way I looked at my own finances. Number 5 was using the professional experience to build out my financials was a blessing. And so one thing I wasn't anticipating is me to actually use my professional experience as a CPA and translate that into the personal financial building. So when I was at Deloitte, I was working with big companies all over the world, Fortune 500 companies that were focused on building wealth and growing and doing all sorts of things. And I said to myself, why can't I do that on a personal level? So that's what I did. I basically took their frameworks and I moved them all the way into the personal finance level, and I incorporated lots of principles that huge companies use on the personal level, and that's why all my students get a lot of success. Number 6 is you will see success after it already was created. It's a weird way to look at it, but when you first start good habits or good principles, you're not gonna see the immediate impact of success for anything that actually has worthiness. So if you begin to work out on day 1, you're not gonna see the success of a six-pack until maybe 6 months in. But once you start to see that, it starts to be amazing, because now not only are you seeing the results from, let's call it 6 months ago, but now you're starting to build upon those results and you're only going to compound from there. Same thing with wealth building, but in the first year, 2, 3, even maybe up to 5, 7 years, it's not going to look like you're moving fast. It's all basically a contribution at that point before the compound interest kicks in and you start to see the results of all your hard work. And that is hard for many people to conceptualize, let alone on a practical basis actually do. Number 7 is the ability to say no. There are a lot of people that pressure us into doing things we don't want to do. We all know that, we've all lived life, but basically going out with friends and family, in the very first bullet point I mentioned, it is hard when you change your lifestyle and you say no to those people you've already said yes to. It is a weird shift in your life that you're going to experience when you start to do this. And when you start to take accountability of your own life and the decisions you make are only going to impact you, not them, it is weird, but you got to get used to it. And I promise you, it's one of the best decisions you'll ever make. Number 8, don't feel bad for previous mistakes. Obviously, what happened in the past happened in the past, and that's okay. But if you don't learn from that and move on, you're going to live in the past your whole entire life, and that's called depression. Don't do it. So let's move on. Let's continue to build upon our mistakes and get better as a result. Number 9, it just sucks. There's a lot of sacrifice that has to occur in the beginning of your financial journey to build real wealth. And it's really hard to actually sacrifice when you're not seeing direct results right away. That is something I struggle with myself, and I'm a pretty disciplined person. Automation, setting up a system or a foundation for your particular situation is the best advice I can give you for this situation, because you will experience the slow, monotonous, boring principles you have to do every single day to make happen. So at least automate that process and make it normal and make it a habit versus I have to do this each and every day. You're gonna feel uncomfortable, but see the bigger picture and understand fundamentally what your why is. What's driving you? What's making you tick? What's making you want to build wealth? And really get deep with yourself and ask yourself why a million times. Why do I want to build wealth? My family. Okay, well, why? Well, I wanna make sure I can provide for them. Well, why? So on and so forth. And continue to ask yourself why as you peel back the layers in the onion, and you eventually get to a really, really deep-rooted reason that is very personal to you, and that is your why. And number 10, lose the ego. The ego will not help you. Ego is good to a certain extent, but sometimes it prevents us from actually having the success that we want to have. So when you're building wealth, don't worry about what your neighbor drives. Don't worry about what your boss drives. Don't worry about the house that your brother-in-law lives in. Don't worry about any of that. Lose the ego, focus on you and your family, and ask yourself in 10 years, in 20 years, and 30 years, will that person in the future be happy with the decisions that you make today? I guarantee that 40-year-old, 50-year-old, or 60-year-old does not care which house you lived in at 30 or which car you drove at 30. It's a thing of the past. It does not matter. Lose the ego, because that is going to crush your wealth building. And those are 10 specific things I had to deal with as I started building my wealth. I either had to get rid of stuff or add things to the picture to ensure I was building wealth at a rapid rate. And that's what we did at a young age, and we're able to reach millionaire status by 30 for that reason. It's not easy. There's different levels of sacrifice, and the different levels of sacrifice will get you different level of results. But it's something you have to come to terms with and come to reality with if you want to build. So I wanted to give you guys some different game today and give you some insight into the other side of personal finance that most people, myself included, don't talk about enough, but actually drive most of the results. I hope that helps. Share this with a friend or a family because I think it would be extremely helpful. And then make sure you comment below and I'll make sure to get back to every single comment. I will see you next Monday.